So these are the results of the assessment that we did this year. We've contrasted two periods here. We've got 2008 and we've got 2013. We've broken it down into the total network. We've got our motorways, we've got arterials and main roads, and we've got other paved roads. So just to focus on the first row, which is the total network, you will see if you compare, we've not lost much in terms of very good roads, and that's good news. But if you look at our good roads, we've lost 10% of our good roads. They've deteriorated to worse quality over 5 years. We don't seem to have lost much in terms of fair, but you know, this jump does not happen from good to very poor. So the roads would have slipped to fair, they would have slipped to poor. But in this category, you still have a relatively similar quantum of roads. If you look at the two last categories, the percentage growth in the 5-year period sees us slipping by 10%. So the quality of roads in the city that has gone to poor and very poor has increased by 10%, from 20% in 2008 to 30% in 2009 and 10. If you look at my next slide, you will see that it's against what we want to achieve. So this is where we were back in 2008. This is where we are in 2013. You can see there the percentage of very poor and poor roads has grown relative to the last 5 years. In fact, the target that I told you about in our VCI 2023 says that we want to restrict the poor and very poor roads to only 10%. So in fact, when we should have gone 10% the other way, we've gone 10% the other way. And that's the work that is cut out for us, and that's the work that we need to do. We would want to make sure that the percentage of roads that are good and very good equals 70% of our network. Right now, we've slipped to just below 40%. We were doing relatively well at about 60-something% here, but we've slipped and we would like to take it back there. So that's the work that we're going to do over the next 10 years. If you look at the National Roads Agency's 10-year projection, it's not very far from this. So the standards we're setting ourselves are practical, and other entities globally are setting the same standards, and that's where we want to go. This is our budget allocation. So if you look in the pack that you've been provided, and you see a very long list of roads that we're going to be working on, that list is only for this year. Those are the roads that we're going to be working on this year, with a budget of 100 million for the regions, which is what you generally have in front of you. Next year, we're going to have an even longer list because the budget more than doubles, okay? So there's going to be an even longer list. If you go to the next year, in fact, it's multitudes of kilometers that we're going to do. So I'm standing here today saying to you that the Joburg road network of 2015-16 is going to look fundamentally different to the road network you see outside today, because of the level of investment that we're putting in. So when people look at the roads that we have in the pack and you don't see your road, and you know that your road is relatively suffering deterioration, please don't be alarmed. That's just the first year's allocation. We've got 2 more years of allocation that we're going to be doing. In fact, we're embarking on an MTEF process now to start planning for the 2014-15 MTEF period, so there will be outer year allocations as well. So the healthy budget allocation of the city continues. We've also secured monies for the M1 motorway. A lot of noise about that freeway, you will know. People drive on the double decker and they're not sure if it's collapsing today or if they will make it through. So there's quite a lot of work we're going to be doing there. We're starting this year with 50 million. In partnership with Sandral, we're going to be doing some traffic modeling, and then we will then make sure that we treat the bridges as well as deal with the drainage system, because it tends to flood when it rains. That's because the drainage system is old and it has clogged up, and in some cases it's been vandalized. And then we will then continue with the resurfacing. We're also going to try and squeeze in another lane where we can, so that at least we increase capacity. But I must tell you, colleagues, I am a proponent of saying that we cannot restrict public transport corridors to only city roads. They must also extend to freeways. And we're going to fight the fight of making sure that we take 1 lane on the freeways for public transportation as we go forward. And Nazir knows that, and we will continue to fight that fight. The M2 also gets an allocation from next year. What we've decided to do next year on the M2 is we will do resurfacing in the necessary sections, but you will know that in the M2, if you're going west, where it terminates with the main reef, there's serious congestion there. So we've got a short-term plan that will relieve that congestion for the next 3 or 4 years or so, which we will implement next year. We've also got another long-term plan, which will need about 100 million to do, which will extend the freeway further west to remove the problem from Fortsbeck. But we will do that. Then the Soweto Highway also has some good allocations. And then rehabilitation, which is the next program, we've got a fairly decent amount that has been allocated, but if you compare, very interesting, if you apply science, things tend to work out. So when we did this, the VCA was on its way, so we did not have the results. And we started to motivate for these funds. This allocation takes us to over $1 billion. When the results of the VCA come out, they tell us that the roads in the city that need resurfacing need around $1 billion over the next 3 to 5 years. We're spot on, okay? But if you look at the roads that need to be rehabilitated and reconstruction, we need about, my guess, it's not finished yet, we will get the results, 1.2 to 1.5 billion. So we need to put a bit of fight there with the mayor to give us more allocation so that it consummates with the demand. We currently sit with 170 million over 3 years. We still are going to be chasing a couple of potholes, so we're not neglecting that because it's a holding action. So there's a bit of money here for patching, for pothole filling, for crack sealing and those activities. And this is only 1.8 billion of our 4.5 billion program that has been allocated over the 3 years. People then ask, but MD, why are you wanting to focus on roads that are good and fair when we know that it's burning in the roads that are very poor and poor? Well, engineering science tells you that if you preserve your good and fair roads, it's cheaper and it's wiser because the unit cost of doing the basic seals that you need to do when your roads are still good and fair is much cheaper than the kind of work you have to do when you rehabilitate. You can see here a normal chipping and spraying, resealing type with slurries or whatever it is, you can get away with relatively modest costs of 125,000 per kilometer. But if you leave your roads to the point where they're poor and very poor, to bring it back to what it should be, which is very good, you can spend anything between $1 million and $5 million per kilometer, which is very, very expensive, okay, even for city roads. If you think that is alarming, I mean, Sunwell, when they did the upgrades of the freeway system here, they saw figures going up to about 40 million per kilometer. So roads can be very expensive. So that's why we want to catch it here. And then when you do this, then you don't have the gradual slip of roads towards poor and poor. If you focus here, all you're going to achieve is that these roads are going to also gradually go there, and you don't make progress. And so if we do this here, then we know that we isolate this contingent. As soon as we get money, we rehabilitate and reconstruct and we move them immediately to there. And then you're done with the problem of potholes. And that's the kind of approach we're following. When we say resurfacing, people think we're only talking asphalt. You know, everyone thinks we should have asphalt roads, all black and so on and so on. We need to educate our communities that there's so much that you can do, which is much cheaper. And it's not inferior. It may just look different, but the functionality is the same. So there are slurry seals that we're going to do in parts of the city. There are stone seals we're going to do in parts of the city. There's the asphalt overlay itself that we're going to do. There's a bit of fog spraying that needs to be done. You will see when roads are relatively very good, there's no work that you need to do. That's why we're not doing much work there. And in cases where you've got really, really very good roads, again, there's nothing you need to do. So we watch our roads. When they're very good, there's no need for us to intervene. All we do is just routine maintenance. We cut the grass, we clear the drains, we do a bit of scuffling to make sure everything looks kosher. But when they get to good, then we start with a bit of chip and spray, and then when they get to fair, we do some serious overlay. And that's exactly the plan that we're going to follow. So this covers the entire region in terms of what we're going to do. That's just a pictorial image of what I just shared with you now. I know some people did math, some didn't. So some people struggle with numbers and some don't. So some people read graphs better than others. But this is just the same articulation of what we shared in the previous slide. What is the basis for the prioritization we've made? Number one, it's science, colleagues. Being an engineer, I was taught that there must be a methodical way of coming to recommendations. So the condition assessment we did and the computational systems that we used spewed out a list of roads that had certain works that needed to be done on them. We took those roads and we superimposed what the mayor deemed to be priorities going forward for the city, and we then were able to incorporate those requirements into the list. We looked at our budget allocation. As I indicated, we've got 100 million this year, 280 million next year, and 630 the next year, so it grows. Weather considerations are also important. When we started with this process, it was still winter. Some things you couldn't do in winter, so we had to prioritize from the beginning of September what we would do, as well as the deployment schedule of contractors. We've got our own resurfacing division, but we said let's not overload them. What we did at the start of the year was to recapacitate the resurfacing division. They had been using one paver for a very long time. We acquired a new paver and we got a new team. So now we've got 2 teams that can work in parallel within the JRA. It's doubled our capacity. But even with that, we decided let's add more people. And so we've got 3 contractors that we've appointed to work with our 2 paver teams to spread them across the region so that we can do work in all 7 regions at the same time. This is the deployment schedule of the different teams. You will see here that for all regions, across all quarters, there will be a presence. And that is what you want to see. Previously, our modus operandi was Chris and the resurfacing team is in Region A in quarter 1. They will be in Region B in quarter 2. They'll be in Region C in quarter 3 and so on. You'll never finish along those lines. And so what we did was to make sure that we've got adequate capacity to be able to do this. Meeting with the mayor yesterday, he already says to Ms. Kumbuzo, how scalable is this? I need you to accelerate and grow this program. So the mandate is already out. I'm going to push the team to do this work as quickly as possible because we may need to add to it, particularly in Region B, because this is where a lot of business happens. And we would want to make sure that quite a lot of the resurfacing that must happen here gets to happen. The mayor was here early this year, called by the business community, and he listened and he heard all of the things that they needed to do. And we will be responding to that program. This is the numbers version of that deployment schedule, and it tells you exactly what we're going to be doing per region, per resurfacing activity, and it gives you the totals per region as well as the grand total. I must tell you that some of the work has already started. There are some roads that have already been finished in different regions. To learn, if I'm not mistaken, in the pack that they have, it shows some of the roads that have been completed already from a resurfacing perspective. But if not, there is a list of roads that Chris and the team have completed. And so we've got 435 kilometers we'll be doing this year. Next year, with almost triple the budget, we will grow that number. And the next year, with almost, 4 or 5 times the budget, in fact 6, that number will grow even more. But that's the deployment schedule going forward. Thank you very much. That was my story for you today.